Welcome to the State of Developer Education, a podcast by Major League Hacking. We explore how technical leaders are creatively tackling the developer education gap to help prepare the next generation of technologists for the real world and build businesses that can adapt to any changes in the technology ecosystem. I'm your host, John Gottfried. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the State of Developer Education. I'm John, your friendly host, and I am excited to be here today with Mike Stowe, who is the Senior Director of Developer Marketing over at RingCentral. How's it going today?
Hey, I'm on the podcast with you. This is fantastic.
I'm really excited to have you here too. So Mike, I love starting all of these interviews way back in time with people's origin stories. I love hearing how people got started in tech. What's your origin story?
Man, I feel like it's like devolved into like Batman, Superman, except for I have no superpowers. I'm definitely not a superhero.
You didn't get bit by like a weird robot years ago?
Well, I did, but nothing happened. No, so the long story short for me is, growing up, as a basketball player, I was gonna be, if you watch the NBA All-Star game, I was gonna be, in the NBA, minus the fact that I'm not that tall and not that talented. But in 7th grade, I injured my knee. And so I went from having 8-9 hours a day that I would literally go, be running, playing basketball, whatnot, to what do I do now? And so I did what all the cool kids are doing. I jumped on a computer. I visited this website called hotyellow98.com, where I could build my first free website. And by the way, the coolest thing about that is, this is back in the 90s. Their website would change based on the time of day. So if it was the morning, you'd see the sun rise. If it was night, the sun would be setting. Little did I know at the time, that's not what all the cool kids were doing, but that's what I pursued. So I did that as a hobby. And then I decided I wanted to go into healthcare. So I was going to be a life flight paramedic. I was going to jump out of helicopters and save lives. And that was a really good plan up until I realized that I hated heights and I hated needles, which are apparently 2 prerequisites for that job. So kind of fell back into what am I going to do next? Again, I enjoyed code. I had, been programming for fun. I decided to try to pursue that. And thankfully, there was an absolutely incredible community that helped me along the way. A lot of people like the term self-taught developer. I can't use it because I made too many mistakes to be self-taught. There are too many people, incredible people in the community that helped me learn. And without even knowing it, they kind of pushed me the path, not just to engineering, but into, DevRel today.
Where was this community? Well, are you talking like an online community or in person?
Online community. So, that's the other thing I think is really impactful. So I grew up in northern Minnesota. And again, this is really the early advent where at the time it was Java, it was, .NET. There wasn't a lot of resources out there for, people to learn programming. And so I would literally try to learn HTML off a web page or learn some JavaScript. And I got involved in PHP. I already hear the groans of the audience. Hey, PHP is a great language. I stand by it. But with that, it was the learning experience. And just not realizing the impact people have, like Larry Ullman, who I had the chance to eventually meet, and an absolutely incredible guy. He wrote a book, a quick start guide to PHP. For my birthday, I wanted to learn programming, so my mom took me to a bookstore. Now, growing up, we didn't have a lot. So we went to the bookstore and we looked at a Java book, $40. No way. I looked at a .NET book, and first of all, I couldn't understand what the language was. I don't think it was written in English. It was so complex. But $60. And we saw Larry's book, and I think it was $24. And my mom was like, you know what? I will give you the extra $4, on top of your birthday money to get this. And so I was able to get that book, and that was like one of the big expenses we had that year. But that set me in motion to learning. And then it was talking to people online. I remember the first deck I did, I put together a deck for a meetup and shared it online. And, one of the more famous people in the PHP, space actually responded to that. And the response was, hey, this actually isn't that bad. I'm like, that's amazing. But they really helped me because, again, I didn't have the money to go to meetups regularly. I was in northern Minnesota, the closest place for meetups and conferences we're having. Minneapolis for meetups, but then it was PHP Tech in Chicago, and I didn't have the money to fly to Chicago, get a hotel, let alone pay for the conference ticket. And by the way, the people at Tech, incredible people who've done an incredible job with the community as well. But it was just all the people who were willing to volunteer their time, help me out, take someone they had never met, someone they never had talked to, ask really silly questions. My first developer job, my first professional developer job, I was getting interviewed. Actually, I guess technically was my second professional developer job. I was getting interviewed. They asked me about things like, have you ever worked with OOP? I had never heard the term object-oriented programming. And so I'm thinking, how do I respond to this? And this will probably date me a little bit. I was like, and you know me, I mean, I'll use the rap song. They asked, how do you work with multidimensional arrays? I'm like, are you work with arrays in space? Like, what's a multidimensional array? I never worked with, so even them willing to, kind of take me in, but then the coworkers I had, I'm gonna give a shout out to a couple of different people there, and they know who they are. Jim Miller, John Vogt, you guys really helped me out learning SQL, learning PHP, learning code, and getting to that next tier. I'll pick on John who asked me like, hey, you don't know what a multidimensional array is, how do you get a job here? And Jim going, hey, don't worry about it, we're gonna get you there. But between the two of them, they helped me grow. So by the way, as I pick on John's a really good friend of mine as well. So they're both very good friends of mine still. So please understand, I'm saying this somewhat in jest, but like I said, great people, and they helped me out. So every step of the way, it was someone in the community who stepped in, whether it was remotely, whether it was when I did have the chance to go to a meetup, or Michael Bork and Peter McIntyre with Northeast PHP, allowing me to come speak and actually paying my way so I could speak at the event. I mean, that was a life changer, getting to network with other people. Again, just it's the little things people do that they don't even realize the impact they're having on others' lives.
It's kind of incredible. Like a lot of the DevRel folks I've talked to, and even engineers as well, have had like so many folks in their career pay it forward. And it almost seems to be sort of like a guiding light for a lot of people in DevRel, right? Is like they had that experience. Someone really helped them out for no reason, right? Just to be helpful. And in DevRel, you have the opportunity to do that all the time. And, it's not like the most quantifiable part of the job, but it's certainly one of the best like feeling parts of the job.
Well, I think I'm going to say it's the soul of the job, like, if that makes sense. And, to your point, again, the community got me into developer marketing, developer relations. I think I'm kind of fast tracking here, but how I got into DevRel, is I wanted to pay it forward. Some people had helped me that I wanted to help others. And so I started doing this thing called tweeting. I don't know if we're still allowed to do that or not, but, I was doing tweeting. I started writing blogs. I started speaking at meetups and then eventually, conferences. And pretty soon I was writing code for 12 hours a day because no developer writes code for, 9 to 5. And I was working on that for 12 hours a day. And I forgot about this thing called sleep. And I remember I was talking to Keith Casey, who was one of the original evangelists at Twilio, and talking to Keith, he goes, there's this job called developer evangelism where you can actually get paid to do this stuff. I'm like, this is amazing. I started pursuing it. Now, Keith forgot to mention one very, very important thing, and that is when I took the job at Constant Contact, my first developer evangelist job, he forgot to mention that instead of working 24 hours a day, you now work 36 hours a day. So I'll pick on him for that, but it was that it was his guidance, and for people looking at getting a DevRel, Keith has a great post about his time at Twilio, and it's a honest take. And that's the one thing that's really important with this industry is there's a lot of amazing things. I've been in DevRel probably close to 10 years now. Before that, professional engineer, and I absolutely love my job. But there's a lot of things that I wasn't expecting, I wasn't wasn't aware of, and the risk of burnout in the industry is extremely high. So I'd recommend reading his blog post. And if you're looking at this and you're saying, hey, I want to become a developer evangelist, I want to get DevRel, take some time to talk to people, be excited about it, but also make sure that you're listening to the good along with the things that maybe aren't so great.
Do you think that DevRel is still that way? Like I worked with Keith at Twilio many years ago, and that is definitely my memory of it, right? Like it was there was a lot, like you were on the road a lot and you were working crazy hours because you were writing blog posts during the day and going to meetups at night. And, part of me thinks it's evolved beyond that, but I'm not really sure. Like, what do you think?
It's funny because I was actually just on a panel with Angel, and Angel shared that during the pandemic, he went from doing 30, 40, 50 events a year to doing 140 events, if I recall correctly, during the pandemic. And I think that's one of the dangers with this role is, one, there's a desire to help people. And so there's that desire to always be on. And was that constant contact. I was working from 6 a.m. to midnight, sometimes longer, taking the train back and forth. And honestly, after a year, like I said, I had nothing left. Like when I left constant contact, I literally went to withdrawals for the next 2 weeks because there's no emails, there's no instant messages on my phone. um, I think it really depends on the program you're in. If you're in a really good program with people who have kind of made those mistakes, to precede you. And by the way, that's how I manage, is because I've made those mistakes. It's, hey, look, I know you want to be on the road 24/7, but we're going to make sure you have checkpoints, make sure you have breaks, make sure we do some rotations. If you're in a really good program, then it can be super beneficial. But the problem is still a lot of programs don't, like a lot of companies don't know what developer marketing, developer relations is. And so their expectations may not align with your expectations. So one hand, you run to the politics of it. How do you justify what you do? I mean, I'll pick on people who fall into marketing. By the way, I'm in marketing, so please don't get after me for this. But if you're a developer evangelist in marketing, you're typically spending money. You're spending money on event, you're spending money on travel. And what people see, by the way, is they see the glamorous lifestyle of DevRel. They see you going, hey, you went to Atlanta, you went to DC, you went to New York, you went to Miami. Oh man, you had to spend a week in Miami. That was terrible. They don't see the fact that, hey, yeah, that was all back-to-back red eyes, and I've gotten any sleep for the rest of the week. And by the way, my vacation in Miami, when I was free, was going to my hotel room and passing out. What they see then is that, and then they see the cost. And marketing has an ROI ratio. They're expecting you to bring in $4, $6, $8 for every dollar you spend, and you're not doing that. Well, then what's your value to the company? And I think that causes challenges for evangelists that are not in a more mature program where they've been able to define that value. At the same time, like I said, sometimes it's super frustrating because, and I'm very fortunate. I've worked at some really incredible places, but when I got into developer evangelism, I assume the role would be going to developers and telling developers about what our company does, getting their feedback, bringing it back to the company. What I didn't expect was I would have to go to the company and tell the company what the company does. And even at RingCentral, by the way, RingCentral is a fantastic company. I have a fantastic team. I mean, across the board, amazing people. But they're not all developers. I have a lot of people who really have never heard of an API or ever worked with an API until they got stuck in some session with the developer marketing guy saying, hey, you need to know what these APIs are and be able to talk about customers. So I think it's a really long-winded way of saying that I think in some respects, yes, things have gotten maybe easier because people like Keith Casey have paved that road. At the same time, I think things have gone a little bit harder because the pandemic threw a huge curveball. It forced a lot of us to kind of reevaluate how we do things. And all of a sudden, there were all these virtual events. And so again, it was nonstop. The politics have not gone away. And unfortunately, as we're looking at kind of, the macroeconomics out there, and companies are tightening up, if a company does not understand the value, the business value that, developer relations brings, especially to the bottom line, those are often to be where the cuts are made. So I think it's a long way of saying it depends on the program. I think it's got a little bit better, but I still think there's a lot of challenges, and there's new challenges, that we didn't have to deal with, back in the day.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when I think back on it, and Twilio was like my first full-time job, right? So I had no frame of reference for what a healthy work-life balance was. The travel and the hours that I was putting in, at least, were not necessarily driven by company pressure, right? Like there was no one at Twilio telling me to be on the road all the time. There was no one telling me, like this is the expectation that you work 20 hours a day. But there was also no one telling me not to. And, I think I loved it. And as you were saying, like a lot of DevRel people love it. And it's sort of like a lot of them hit burnout because they love it too much. But, I think one of the things that's really different about it is, I was doing it out of passion and love, and a lot of DevRel people were. And that's not to say it was healthy, but it was certainly something I wanted. And a lot of teams that have sort of popped up over the years often look at those examples where it's like the DevRel person on the road all the time, and they emulate the inputs without looking at the outputs.
Yes.
Right. Where they're like, yes, like we should be on the road all the time. We should be, omnipresent at all of these events and communities. And I think the thing they miss is that, like, even Twilio, but really any DevRel team eventually had to kind of like take a step back and be like, okay, like we're putting a crap ton of time into these inputs for DevRel, how much time we are spending, how we're engaging the community, but we also need to be able to justify the outputs of our work. And that often got lost in the shuffle, right? Like there was a period of time where I would talk to people and be like, we want to do what like Twilio is doing, we want to do what SendGrid is doing, but they didn't necessarily think critically about it. And I know that like a lot of the work that you've done is on that back end, right? Like how do you get the company to think critically about DevRel? How do you make sure that DevRel can justify its existence? I mean, like, how do you justify your existence?
So I wish I could say that again. I'm just super brilliant, and I came up with this idea on my own. The reality is, it came from a lot of hard lessons learned. Again, I want to be really careful to say there. I can't say enough good things about Constant Contact. It was a great company, but I came in as a engineer trying to get into DevRel. I came in thinking I was going to go into an established program, to find out that when I was the only person really was doing marketing to developers. All of a sudden ran into challenges between brand versus the company brand, stereotypes of how people perceive developers. And I think that's gotten a lot better versus, how developers actually interact. And so there are a lot of missteps along the way, and so again, trial by fire, learning the hard way here. What it taught me was that a lot of my assumptions coming in from the developer space were not accurate. Companies don't, even though they've invested into building out a platform, the company may not see the full value of the platform or the opportunity. And I'm gonna pick on RingCentral. If you look at RingCentral, I think we have, and I mean this all due respect to everyone out there, because we have great companies, Twilio, Vange, all great companies. So please don't, again, mistake what I'm saying here. But I think we have one of the most incredible and unique platforms out there, because we can combine your traditional office phone with those APIs. When I first was reached out to by RingCentral, I'll be honest, they're like, hey, do you want to join RingCentral? I'm like, no. Hopefully my boss isn't watching this. I was like, look, there's Twilio, there's Vonage, there's Pliable. You've got all these great APIs out there already. What are you guys bringing to the table? And Rob's not doing, or Phil's not doing, like using the groundwork that you and Keith laid at Twilio. And thankfully, I had a very persistent recruiter, and she said, keep looking. And finally, she said, look, they made some updates to their webpage. Take another look. And if you're still not interested, then I'll stop calling you. And I'm like, hey, great. Times have changed. Back then I was like, okay, if the recruiter stops calling, that's a great thing, because my inbox won't be full the next day. And so I took another look, and that's when I realized, wow, there's all this potential. Meeting with the team at RingCentral, there are people who saw the potential. There are a lot of people who didn't, realize what they were sitting on. And what I realized at that point, and this goes back to lessons learned from Constant Contact, and was that you have to have a strong foundation to build a house. And what I knew was that if I didn't empower the company to help tell the story, it would be me going out there telling a story that wasn't going to be echoed, that wasn't going to be resonated, and was going to oftentimes be conflicted. If I didn't empower, our sales team, our CSMs, our solutions engineers to talk about the platform, then they would bury the lead. They'd talk about other capabilities. It also meant that we had to find a way to build a program in a scalable manner. Because going in and starting a program is, I think, very different than going to an established program. When you go into to start a program, you're it. You're the strategy guy. You're the execution guy. You're the guy managing the budget. You're the guy on the road doing the talks. And one of the hard lessons I had early on was that people, again, because they don't necessarily understand the audience, because that's not their target audience, especially if you're not a developer first company, they don't understand what's needed to be successful. And so they want to throw marketing dollars at it and say, go beyond the road, go talk about this. But they actually don't know if they have product market fit or a solution that developers can use. At RingCentral, again, a terrible story, but I'm gonna tell it. The first thing I did was do a competitive analysis. If I'm using, Twilio's API, how long does it take me to build a two-way SMS bot? If I'm using Vange's API, how long does it take me? And I won't name names here. One took me 15 minutes, one took me 20 minutes. Both had minor issues, but one of those was actually the Tumult. Tumult's been documented since then. And so, fixed that problem. So I'm sure it's a much faster experience. I used RingCentral, it took me 40 hours. That's a problem. And if I go out telling people go use the RingCentral SMS API, and granted, this was 5 years ago, but if I go out and tell people use the RingCentral SMS API, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend marketing money to create a bad experience and push them to Twilio, push them to Vonage. So the first step we looked at was, why does it take 40 hours? How do we improve this experience? And for me, I use something called the developer hierarchy of needs, which is looking at what does a developer need to be successful with the platform. And the first thing it starts with, I think, is that, kind of the topic we're talking about, developer education, basic onboarding. Do you have the API documentation or the reference and the tools for me to be able to complete an API call and use your API? Because no matter what else you do, if you don't have the most basic thing and I can't use your API, you're wasting your money. Then it goes into community, because I think community is actually the second most important component. Then it gets into more of expanded enablement options. It gets into events, but it all starts with, do we have the basics in place? The second piece that I use is the developer marketing funnel, or the developer journey, which also looks at, are developers aware of the platform? Are they interested in the platform? Are they considering using the platform? Have they adopted it? That doesn't mean that they bought it, but are they actually using it? Maybe they're using a free account. And then do they become an advocate for the platform? And the reason I use that funnel is to say, where are the issues we have? If we have an issue with awareness, let's not be worried about advocacy just yet. Let's worry about awareness. Get people into the funnel, and then we'll see what the next stage of the funnel is not working, and we've fixed that as we go. So if people are super interested, they're considering, but they're not adopting, what's the cause of that? And if you think of it as kind of a well-oiled machine, that's the approach that I've taken. And the last one, I'm going to give credit to Rob Spector on this one, is a 3-core model. Evangelism, community, and education. We put a lot of weight on evangelism. And I think evangelism is an absolutely key component. But at the same time, if you look at some of the most successful programs out there, and I always ask people, what's the most successful program? You're like, oh, Twilio or Slack or, RingCentral, well, hopefully. But I think the most successful programs out there are programs like GitHub and Stack Overflow, where it's all based on community and all based on education. DigitalOcean, if you search for something on Linux, everything shows up DigitalOcean. And so people underestimate the power of education, not just telling them about your company, but telling them about how to become a subject matter expert or help them grow their careers, and the power of community as part of that 3-core model. Once we do that, and this is a really long answer, so I apologize. The next thing we look at then is, how do we validate the work we're doing? Now, every new program, I think you start with something I call vanity metrics. I call them vanity metrics because they actually don't mean anything. They're things like, how many developers do you have in your community? How many API calls are being made? How many monthly active apps or ISV apps do you have? And these are really exciting numbers. These are your PR numbers. These are numbers that you tout in a press release, you share at the company, you share earnings, but they actually don't mean anything, because you can have 1,000 active users, and all they're doing is costing your company money, not contributing to the company bottom line. What's the value that it's bringing to the business? Now, vanity metrics are good to start your program with, because you need a benchmark. Like, I don't think, unless you're selling your APIs from day one, you don't go in day one with a revenue number. But as the program then matures, you need to be working towards, how are we driving towards that bottom line? How are we supporting the company? And this is something that's hard for developer evangelists, I think. As a developer evangelist, you really have two bosses. You have the developers in the community, because you want to do what's best for them, but you have the company you work for. And sometimes we lose sight of that. Sometimes we go, I work for the developers, but then we work for the company too. And so we have to find that balance of making sure that we're doing what's right for developers and best for our community, but we're also helping the company move forward, and we're not just a cost center. I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier in terms of, hey, we do a whole bunch of stuff, but what's the driving in terms of value? And by the way, I can't iterate that enough. When I was pursuing the Life Flight paramedic, one of the things that they told us was, you're no good to anyone else if you get injured. For developer evangelists, people looking at it, you're no good if you burn yourself out. There have been too many people in this industry who have jumped in, who have run, and I like to say, developer evangelists are like racehorses. They like to run, and they'll keep running and running, but they will run themselves, out. So make sure you understand that you need to take time for yourself. You need to take time to recover. You need to take time to set aside. And I got to the extreme, by the way. When I moved to California, I didn't have internet in my house. I had a little my cellular Wi-Fi, so if I need internet for an emergency, I had it. But I was not going to be online when I got home. And that was a lesson I learned after, kind of being on for 24/7. But yeah, going back to your original question, because I want a huge tangent there. It's all about understanding where you are in the community, where you are in the company, how the community perceives you. Constant Contact. MailChimp was the cool company. Constant Contact was kind of the archaic. Hey, who are you guys? MuleSoft, we had taken an open source solution and created an enterprise solution. And we had ticked off a lot of developers in the process. At the same time, we were pushing something called an ESB, or Enterprise Service Bus. And everyone was looking at SOA and going, no, we don't want enterprise service buses. We want something new. And so it's like, how do you position it in a way that actually resonates? Because it's really powerful. And by the way, the irony is that if you look at the tools coming out, Zapier, Make, TIBCO, MuleSoft, Informatica, they're all really SOA-based architectural tools, or ESBs. I'll get myself in trouble with the microservices people here. RingCentral. RingCentral is like, who are you guys? We're either archaic, we're the doorbell company, or my favorite was a person goes, hey, you guys are a communications company. I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, good luck. I'm like, okay. He goes, yeah. He goes, and I'm gonna pick on Twilio. He goes, because that's what he said. He goes, you're going against Twilio. He goes, you guys don't have a chance. I'm like, well, with all due respect, we are a public company. We've been around for 20 years. But again, it's that perception, and so you have to really fight that perception both externally, build the perception internally, build the foundation so that you have the documentation, you have the enablement, and then everything you do from that needs to scale from that forward. And that's I think the other mindset from going in and being, I'm a developer evangelist at a mature company, or mature program, excuse me, to I'm building a program, is you have to be in that scale mindset, because you're only one person and you will be expected to do everything, just because the company doesn't honestly know what to expect in that case.
So there's a lot to unpack there. Let me start with when you joined RingCentral. So you mentioned that you started from almost like first principles, right? Like, how do we improve the developer experience before we go out and market it really heavily? But you were hired into developer marketing, right? Like, you report into marketing. I've talked to a lot of people at this point about the fact that developer advocacy marketing, whatever you want to call it, is so multifaceted that even if you report into one division, you are inevitably impacting many different parts of the organization. How did you make that case for spending all your time on docs and whatever, getting started flows, to a marketing leader? How do you actually justify that work from the perspective of ultimately you have to impact the bottom line?
So again, I wish I could say everything is a great process. There's never any bumps in the road. What it was again, the first was the test, and thankfully my counterpart on the product, John Wong at the time, we knew each other previously. He knew my work in the API space, and so he knew that I wasn't someone who's going to come in and not necessarily know how to use an API. And so when I gave that information to him, I mean, I think there was initially a little bit of a whoa moment of are you sure? Was it this? What caused this? And so I was looking at the myriad of issues. And the second was, and again, John absolutely ran with it. I can't give enough credit. The second then was realizing that our documentation needs to be improved. If we're going to be a world-class solution, we have to be a world-class solution. And so we hired an individual by the name of Bern Reese to come in and work on the documentation. How I made that case was actually really simple. I brought in people and did user testing. So we actually did virtual user testing, asked people to use our APIs, and some of the skeptics are going, hey, we got this great platform. We're watching in real time people failing at the most basic steps. And so I think that opened up a lot of eyes. And again, I'll be very clear. There's a lot of goodness with the platform when I joined. I'm not walking in and saying, hey, I flipped this thing on its head overnight. That's not the case. That'll never be the case for anyone. But walking in, it's there's so much goodness, but there were just some things that need polished or need to be fixed for us to get across the finish line. And that's been our focus ever since day one, is creating a world-class product and making sure we're putting developers first. behind the scenes, there's always going to be things that happen. Anybody who's in IT or engineering knows there's always things that go on. Our goal is to mitigate that, to get ahead of it, bringing in different solutions to make sure that we're monitoring, that we know the issue is, doing regular user testing. And so that's how we remedied that part, was, again, empirical evidence. It wasn't just me saying it. We got other developers doing it, and we did hackathons, and encouraged our product team to join the hackathon so they could see what was happening. The second aspect of it was setting expectations. And this is hard because, a lot of times when you're hired into this field, the person who hires you has an expectation for what your job is. But if they're not in DevRel, or they haven't done DevRel or Dev marketing, they actually don't know what your job is. So day one, I joined RingCentral, and my boss, who's absolutely my boss at the time, who's absolutely fantastic, good friend of mine, said, "Hey, you report to product marketing. We create data sheets, case studies, videos. I need you to create a data sheet for each one of our APIs." I'm like, "We have over, at the time, 200 APIs. I'm not creating 200 data." I'm like, "No, that's what documentation is for." And that required me to bring some information to my manager, say, "Hey, this is what I think we should do. This is the strategy. This is the plan. And by the way, when you have a comprehensive plan, you put that strategy, and you have metrics that say, these are success metrics. And if we don't hit these metrics, like one of the things I have a kill line, which is, if we hit this line, we have to either adjust our tactics or kill this program and change what we're doing. Like, we're not hitting the success that we expect." That goes a long way, because they see that you're looking at holistically. They see that you're looking at the metrics and how you can impact the program, but they also see that you're willing to be wrong and you're willing to adjust. And because you're willing to be humble about it, you're going to get more trust from them typically. And it takes trust on your manager's end. Not every manager is going to go, "Hey, yeah, I was in product marketing for 20 years, and you're telling me that everything we did for product marketing is wrong for developers. Go for it." A lot of people are going to have a hard time adjusting that, and so as we baby steps, and there's going to be some compromise. So it's like, "Hey, maybe let's do a data sheet for this and this." And by the way, one thing I'll share is, if you're going into marketing, a lot of marketers don't understand developers, but one of the best lessons I had when I was at Constant Contact, I came as a developer, is learning why marketing does the things that marketing does. And I'm biased because I'm a developer and marketer, but it's like, man, if we took what marketing does and the best of marketing, we took the best of engineering and put them together, like, to me, that's like a superpower in itself. There are reasons marketing does things the way they do. You can learn a lot from these individuals. You can learn a lot about ROI, and you can learn a lot about impacting the business. So don't operate a silo, and be willing to to concede and try things that they want to do as well, as long as it's not going to hurt you in the community. Because sometimes you get things. I had a marketer. I'm not going to name names, but they're like, "Hey, you're doing a conference with 25% CEOs. Here's a bingo card where you should find the trolling CEO." Like, I don't think that's going to resonate well. And that's kind of how I convinced them, was, here's what the empirical evidence, here's the plan, here's the metrics we're going to hit, and if we don't hit it, then we're going to change. And then it was a lot of meetings, a lot of time, gain buy-in. That first month, my entire time was primarily spent internally versus externally. That's their mistake. Again, learn from Constant Contact. You have to be focused internally. Today, I spend probably, and granted, it's increased a little bit, but I probably spend about 70% of my efforts on internal marketing versus external marketing. So making sure the company is brought up to speed, knows what you're doing, and then making sure you're telling your story. The greatest skill of a marketer, and I think this is a core principle of being a developer evangelist. I think to be a developer evangelist, you have to have a love or passion of helping others. And I got myself in trouble saying that. I'm going to double down on it. I think if you go in the industry and your goal is not to help others, with everything that gets thrown at you, you're going to burn out. At the same time, I think you have to be a great storyteller. And marketers, really good marketers are great storytellers. You have to tell the story internally. You have to make sure everyone's aware of your story. And it's going to start small. I started telling the story to my manager and to the product team and to anybody that would listen. Like, I swear I got on a soapbox to tell a story. A few months ago, I had the privilege of telling the story to our board of directors. So as you tell that story and it resonates, people are going to get excited. They're going to be able to tell the story, but they also want you telling the story to more people.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. You made kind of an offhand comment about using hackathons as like product testing and feedback. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I know it's a little self-serving, but like, I'm curious about it because we've done it. I've seen other people do it. And, I think it's an interesting use case for that format of event.
So there's a really interesting presentation. You might have heard of this one that I actually recommend to everyone I speak to about hackathons. And the presentation is called "Don't Throw That Hackathon" by Mike Swift.
Very familiar.
I thought you might be familiar with that one, but in that, obviously it talks about MLH and the great work you guys are doing. But the point is made that there's a purpose for hackathons and there's a reason not to do hackathons. And I will tell you right now that almost every company I talk to, they want to do a hackathon for the wrong reasons. And so that's why I love that presentation. I'm so grateful that you and Mike threw that out there. People say we're going to throw a hackathon and get a production quality, release that we can add to our exchange, in 24, 48, 72 hours. It's not going to happen. First of all, a lot of these hackathons, you're people who are, entry level, especially if you're going to a college hackathon, which is a great experience, by the way, because I'll get into the college aspect in a little bit, but, college hackathons should not be overlooked by any means. They're absolutely crucial to success. Number two, half of us are like hyped up on caffeine at the time where we're not even in our right mind anymore. We're just like really programming. And the only way we're still awake is because we've had 4 rock stars or Red Bulls or whatever it is. On top of that, you get prizes for using other people's APIs. So if there's multiple vendors, that means I tried to cram in 14 different companies' APIs to make this product so I had the best chance of winning. You're not going to get something that's production quality. Just like you would expect your engineering team, I hope, to crank out a production quality app in 48 hours. So the second is, companies will do it to drive sales. I have yet to see that be successful. John, I don't know if you've seen that be successful.
Never.
Yeah, so people are coming to learn about your technology to try it, but you also understand who your buyer is. At RingCentral, my buyer is not the developer. My developer is an end user. So they're still a customer and they're my customer, but they're not writing the check. When I was at MuleSoft, our solution started at $80,000 for a core. I wish I had met developers who were willing to write me an $8,000 check because it made my job a lot easier because they love the software. Again, there were decision makers that had to buy that software. So you're not going to drive sales. People will try out your platform. What they will become is, if they like your platform, advocates, and they can refer you to other individuals, and you will see an indirect revenue from these hackathons, but you're not going to see direct revenue from them. Instead, why I like hackathons and why I recommend hackathons: brand awareness. Again, RingCentral, we're the world's largest cloud communications platform for unified communications. That being said, we were not well known in the developer space. I want to get in front of developers. I want them to go, hey, you guys aren't the doorbell company. You're this awesome communications company. Number two is product feedback. Invaluable. We had a hackathon with a sponsorship. It was a small hackathon, and it was actually run by friends of mine. So, I felt very comfortable doing this. We knew we had some issues that had to be resolved. I took a member of our product team, we went to this hackathon, and it was a disaster. Just candidly, it was a disaster. Different things that we were saying need to get fixed weren't working. And, the product team saw that firsthand. We were on the phone with engineers, and so as bad of an experience as it was a great experience because we set the expectation. That's the other thing, by the way, as you talk about the foundation going out the community, you have to know where you are as a program. Year one at RingCentral, we came out and said, look, we are working on getting to be world-class. This is not going to, you're not going to use this and go, hey, this is absolutely the best platform we've ever used year one. We want you to be that stakeholder that drives us, keeps us honest, and helps us improve. And as I say that, again, I truly believe we have a world-class platform. RingCentral has gone from being one of the least known platforms for communications in the developer space to one of the most award-winning in the last 5 years. So there's been huge traction there, but that's because we went to developers honestly and said, we have some issues we need to work through. We need your help to get there. And in the hackathon, they gave us that feedback. And you're going to have developers that are absolutely awesome. And they're like, hey, Mike, did you know this isn't working? This is kind of frustrating, or this could be done better. Hey, here's a way you could do this. They're giving us the ideas. And you have developers who are like, man, this is garbage. But that's important feedback because the reality is that's the experience that your developers are going to have externally if you push it and if you don't get those things fixed. So feedback on documentation, this documentation didn't make sense. Feedback on product onboarding, and all this feedback, by the way, led us to the 5-minute quick start guide. We've been a finalist for best documentation several years now. Led to those investments because of that. So the product information or the feedback that you get is absolutely invaluable. And if you have a great experience and you're able to get that product feedback, you're getting brand awareness, you're creating a positive perception, and you're getting that feedback. I think those are huge wins and reasons I would absolutely do a hackathon. Another reason I do a hackathon, recruiting, hiring. If I'm going to, again, MLH, we'll talk about the college hackathons here. First of all, college students are I'm gonna say that they haven't been marred by the industry yet. They're enthusiastic. I'll be honest. You tell me to stay up code for 72 hours. I'm like, look, I got 5 hours of sleep this week. Like, it ain't gonna happen. College students are like, yeah, let's grab pizza, let's grab Mountain Dew, let's grab the Red Bull, let's make it happen. They're also on the cutting edge of technology and social trends. So we often overlook them because, again, they're not writing the check, but they're the ones who are talking about what's coming. And I hate to say this, a lot of times they're actually ahead of technology versus like enterprises, where they're still doing the DB2 database. And then last but not least, college students are looking for internships. They're looking for jobs. So that's why I would do a hackathon. It's for those three reasons. But again, I absolutely would not do a hackathon for driving revenue in terms of, hey, we're going to make sales or getting production ready apps. And I cannot recommend, again, it's called Don't Throw That Hackathon. I believe it's by Mike Swift with MLH. Literally, if you pause this podcast right now, go watch that. It's worth the watch.
Yeah, it's a fantastic talk. And I think everything he said in it, and that post was written like 10 years ago, still rings true. But I completely agree with you. I think it's a really fantastic channel, but not for the reasons that people often think. Well, one interesting stat I'll just share before we move on is talking about like the long tail value of these events. Like MLH has been around for 10 years now, and we obviously care a lot about like what developers are doing in their careers and what they're learning. One of the stats we found is that almost 40% of our alumni have introduced a technology into production at their job that they first used at a hackathon.
That's
right?
incredible.
Like, that's hundreds of thousands of people. And, that's a long tail. Like, it might have taken them 3 to 5 years to get to that point. But like, when you think about like developer awareness as a function, like it matters that people know who you are, have positive experiences with your platform, and have your tool in their tool belt so that when the time is right, they do introduce it. And like, there's a million anecdotal stories to that effect. Like, I remember a ton of them from when I was at Twilio, but like, it's a real thing. And I think it's a real use case for hackathons, but also any other community events, right? Like, going and speaking at a conference may not get people to buy your product next day, but now they know who you are.
Absolutely. So I like to use the phrase that, you can go for leads or you can go for relationships.
Yep.
Leads are people that you want to do something. It's hey, I want you to buy this product. They buy it, and that's your relationship. That's it. Like, done. Relationships are people who want to do things for you because they know that you want to do things for them. Mm-hmm. And to your point, when you build this program, everything you do has to be long tail. Yeah. The investments we made in our community in year one, we did not see a huge benefit from that. Like, we talk about vanity metrics and kind of, hey, we have to get the snowball rolling downhill. We were very blessed to have won the best community award from Dev Portal this year. That's 5 years of work in the making. That's numerous events. That's numerous engagements. That's bringing people in. So as you do it, again, I would focus on the relationship aspect and understand that, to your point, it's going to be a long tail. Now, that being said, you're going to get some really cool wins. I shouldn't tell a startup I'm going to, because why not? When I was at MuleSoft, I had a new manager come in, and my manager did not, again, traditional marketing background, did not understand the value of developer relations, developer marketing. What they saw was me going to these events, spending a lot of money as a sponsor, and getting that much in return. And so they basically said, look, this is your last event. Like, after this, we're going to shift focus, and this is going to be a marketing program. And so I went and gave the talk, knowing it was my last talk. I was actually basically prepared to pack my box after that. I was like, this is going to end well, but gave the talk, got back to the office. And as soon as I got back to my desk, I had a call. And it's from a guy named Charles, who's one of our sales reps. He goes, Mike, did you just do a talk? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, yeah, we just got two really strong opportunities from that talk. So you will get, and thankfully, like I said, that saved my job. And my boss was like, oh yeah, go do more talks. But that's not going to be the expectation. Like I said, it's about building that relationship, building that opportunity to be a part of the community. That's the other thing I'll say. And we're getting a little bit off of the education topic here, but at RingCentral, and this has been the case for every program I built, it's not our community. We are privileged to be part of the community of people who love RingCentral, and we are, privileged to engage with them. But we are a part of the community. We don't run the community. We don't manage the community. We try to obviously engage the community, set an example, be there, support the community. But it's understanding that they run the community. The developers are the community, not you. They set the tone in terms of how they respond. And their tone, by the way, will be set based on how you treat them. The other thing I like to say is, developers are the most loyal and most volatile target audience in the world. They will absolutely, stand by your brand if you treat them right, if you create good relationships, if you value them. It's the golden rule. Everything you do needs to be symbiotic. It needs to be for their benefit. Right? The two bosses, the company and the developer. At the same time, if you don't value them, if you try to take advantage of them, if you're dishonest with them, I promise you, they will be at your competitors so fast that you won't even have a chance to say what happened. Several years ago, there's a study that said the two most important values in developer relations are empathy and integrity. I can't emphasize that enough. That's this terrible phrasing. I can't emphasize empathy enough.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's. I think that's a really great summary to our entire conversation here. I know we only have a couple of minutes left. The question I always like to kind of end on is sort of like an existential question for people. Like, when you think back about all the work you've done and even your own educational journey, like, what would you change about how developers learn, how developers are educated?
There's been some really interesting developments in the space. One of the cooler tools I've seen was Katacoda, which was eventually rolled into, I believe it was O'Reilly, where you could go in and use interactive experiences. That was really awesome. And so I'd love to see more hands-on tools, more guides, more solutions there. I'm actually really selfish. The thing that I would change, and this is for my own benefit, is the awareness and emphasis on free resources for learning. Again, growing up, buying that PHP book, and by the way, I can't thank Larry enough because that skyrocketed my career. Without that, I wouldn't have a career. That was really that was a big investment for my family. And at the time it was, no, you need to be taking professional courses. You need to be buying expensive books. You need to be, subscribing to, online courses or going to these expensive conferences. I think the advent of community meetups, community conferences, has been invaluable. And I think one fear I have is that with the pandemic, the people who are kind of leading that, you realize, wow, I actually have time to spend with my family, or sleep, or, and they're not doing those now. We're not seeing as many in-person events. We're not seeing those opportunities. We're not seeing, the mentorship groups that we used to see, of people saying, hey, if you have questions, I will mentor you. I'll help you grow. I'd love to see that come back. I'd love to see, to your point, we can't do everything that Twilio did initially, where they had all these things. We can't do everything that Amazon did when they launched into developer relations. But there are a lot of good things that were being done that maybe didn't have a direct revenue value that we could tie to it, but had an intangible value. Again, speaking at the meetups, sharing the knowledge, speaking on topics that it wasn't even on Twilio's API or RingCentral's API. I was talking about, here's how you work with APIs, or here's how you work with this technology. Office hours, things like that. That's what I'd love to see more of, and more resources, because I know how good my code is in production. I like to tell people there's a reason in marketing. We are, again, getting old here. We're responsible for helping, the new generations develop best practices, develop the discipline to have good behaviors with their code. That means commenting your code. I know that people hate doing that still, but making sure that's there, using unit tests, etc. I might be really old. That might be just a de facto thing now, but making sure that we're doing that. That's what I'd love to see from an education standpoint. Yeah. More free resources, more interactive resources, and more hands-on kind of one-to-one mentoring.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike. I truly enjoyed our conversation, and I honestly feel like we could go on for many hours here digging into all the little nuances of developer communities. But I really appreciate your time. Folks, I hope you enjoyed listening. We'll include some links to Mike and his work at RingCentral in the notes. And if you want to hear more, definitely like the podcast and subscribe and look out for more episodes soon. But thank you again, and happy hacking. The State of Developer Education is brought to you by Major League Hacking, or MLH. To find out more about MLH and how we power innovation, cultivate developer communities, and teach technical skills to students around the world, visit mlh.io. And then make sure to search for developer education in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Don't forget to like and review the show, and we'll give you a shout out on a future episode. On behalf of the team here at MLH, thanks for listening and helping us empower the next generation of technologists. Happy hacking.